A single line in Star Trek Generations made Janeway an admiral before Captain Picard. When Star Trek Generations hit theaters in 1994, it was meant to serve as both a farewell to Captain James T. Kirk and a grand cinematic debut for the Star Trek The Next Generation crew. While fans were busy debating Kirk's death or Picard's Nexus journey, there was a quiet but fascinating moment hidden in the dialogue, one that gave Catherine Janeway an early promotion to Admiral, years before audiences ever saw her in that rank. A single line in Generations inadvertently placed Janeway ahead of Captain Picard in Starfleet's hierarchy, reshaping how we interpret the career paths of two of Trek's most iconic captains. The line that changed everything. Early in Generations, Picard is seen grappling with devastating personal news. In one scene, he speaks with Counselor Troy in the ready room after learning of his brother Robert and nephew Reen's deaths in a fire back on Earth. Trying to process his grief, Picard laments the loss of his family line and admits that he may never leave behind a legacy. But it's in the broader context of the movie's dialogue, particularly Starfleet's reassignment of command and references to Admiralty, that the slip happens. A line about the shifting ranks within Starfleet, largely overlooked at the time, sets up the possibility that Catherine Janeway was already on the Admiralty track while Picard remained firmly in the captain's chair. The moment is subtle. The crew of the Enterprise D is being reminded that they serve under the oversight of Starfleet Command's admirals, and the film frames captains like Picard as soldiers in the field rather than policymakers. This suggests that while Picard was still commanding his ship directly, other captains, Janeway among them, had already begun the transition into the Admiralty ranks. Janeway's career path. When Star Trek Voyager launched in 1995, Janeway was introduced as a starship captain like Picard, commanding the USS Voyager on its fateful mission into the Badlands. But by the time of Star Trek Nemesis in 2002, Janeway had leapfrogged Picard on the promotion ladder. She appeared in a brief cameo, delivering orders to Picard as Admiral Janeway. This moment shocked fans. How could Janeway, who spent 7 years lost in the Delta Quadrant, isolated from Starfleet, return to the Alpha Quadrant and be promoted above the legendary Picard in such a short time? On the surface, it didn't make sense. Picard was the hero of Wolf 359, the captain who negotiated peace with Klingons, faced down the Borg, and stopped the Romulans countless times. Janeway had been cut off, commanding her ship brilliantly, but with limited Starfleet oversight. And yet, Generations had already set the stage. By establishing that Starfleet was pushing certain captains into strategic roles sooner, it opened the door for Janeway's rapid ascent. In essence, the movie hinted that Janeway was always meant to be on a faster track to Admiralty, while Picard's destiny was to remain a captain. Why Picard never became Admiral? The idea that Picard was never promoted above captain became something of a running theme in Trek canon. Even when fans expected him to rise in rank, the writers doubled down on his identity as a starship commander. For Picard, being a captain wasn't just a rank, it was who he was. The bridge of a starship was where he belonged, not an office at Starfleet Command. This is underscored by his appearances in Star Trek Picard. Decades later, even after retirement, Picard was still defined by his years as a captain, not by any desk-bound career in the Admiralty. Generations planted this seed by showing how Starfleet already viewed him, a man whose talents were best used in direct exploration and diplomacy, not bureaucracy. Janeway, by contrast, was always framed as someone with a broader strategic mindset. While she could make the tough decisions in the Delta Quadrant, she also had a natural inclination toward shaping policy and training the next generation of officers. When she finally returned to the Alpha Quadrant, her leadership in bringing Voyager home made her a symbol of Starfleet's resilience. Promoting her was inevitable. The quiet competition between captains. It's fascinating to look back on Generations and realize that the film unintentionally set up a quiet rivalry between Picard and Janeway, one that wasn't about who was the better captain, but about who was destined for what kind of leadership. Picard was the explorer, the philosopher, the diplomat. He thrived on the bridge, confronting the unknown. Janeway, though equally capable in those areas, had the quality Starfleet needed in its admiralty: decisive judgment, bold experimentation, and the ability to make hard choices that carried long-term consequences for the Federation. The single line in Generations didn't just foreshadow Janeway's future. It redefined Picard's. By firmly grounding him as a captain, the movie left room for another figure, Janeway, to represent the next generation of admirals. Legacy of that line. What seemed like a throwaway bit of dialogue has become a cornerstone in